right, so today we have Bettymaya Foott, the Director of Engagement, and this is for the International Dark Sky Association in Tucson. Hello, we've got her virtually here, and she'll talk about these dark skies, of course, a little bit more. Dark Sky Association, and she graduated from the University of Utah with an HBS in Environmental and Sustainability Studies, and her thesis was titled Light Pollution Hazards Within Ecosystems and Mitigation Strategies for the Future. Bettymaya is an expert in photography, telescope viewing, and astrophotography. And again, so we've got her on deck. That's great. So she will be here to answer your questions. Again, just go ahead and drop them in that chat. And I'm going to now play her video. Turn off my video as well. I hope you guys enjoy, and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Bettymaya Foott, and I'm the Director of Engagement for the International Dark Sky Association, and I'm also an astrophotographer. So I'm here to talk with you today about dark skies and astrophotography. And I want to thank the Art of Planetary Sciences, the Lunar and Planetary Laboratory, as well as Allison McGraw for inviting me here today. So this is one of my favorite quotes from Martin Luther King Jr. And usually I start with this quote as kind of a challenge to thinking about darkness as something bad and scary, and challenge you all to maybe change that perspective. But today I think this quote really speaks to another important aspect of this work, which is accessibility and social justice. And I want to acknowledge that this is being recorded during a time of worldwide protests about the systemic racism in our society today. And even for me as a woman, I find that dark places are not always accessible and safe for me. And so we should challenge ourselves to consider how they might not be safe for people of color. And that recognize that it's important to work to increase access to public spaces at night. So really only when it is dark enough, safe enough, and accessible enough can we all see the stars and appreciate them while feeling safe. It's a privilege to be out there experiencing dark skies at night. And it's a privilege to see the Milky Way because most of us really can't in the world. As you can see here, these statistics kind of speak for themselves. 80% of the global population cannot see the Milky Way, and that means most people probably haven't. And 99% of US and Europe live under light pollution, and that's a huge amount of people who live without access to dark skies. So really this is something that we need to all work together to really try to bring back to our society today and make people aware that dark skies are a resource worth protecting. And dark skies are threatened by three different aspects of light pollution. And the first is sky glow. So sky glow is that dome of light along the horizon that obscures our view of the night sky. And this is caused by misdirected light scattering through our atmosphere. And here we can see the sky glow of Tucson to the right of the image, and dark skies revealing Milky Way to the left from Oracle State Park. And have you ever been driving down a lonely road at night only to be blinded by oncoming high beams that somebody forgot to turn off? Well, you, my dear, have experienced glare. Glare is when light enters our eyes at shallow angles, causing pain and restriction of the pupil and reducing visual acuity. And who here has ever been kept awake by light streaming into their bedroom window at night? I know I have, and this is a prime example of light trespass, which is when light from somebody else's property or a street light is shining into your property or particularly into your home. And we can think of light trespass actually as a private property rights issue. And all types of this light pollution are increasing rapidly. These images show the progression of artificial light at night as seen from space. And when we watch this progression, it's really not hard to imagine a future without dark skies anywhere. And light pollution is increasing at a rate of 2% per year, and that is a low-end estimate of how fast light pollution is increasing. So this is definitely a problem that needs addressing currently. Here we have a local example. Here's Tucson a few years ago, and then just from 2018 as well, you can see that clear increase in light pollution, just even in the area where we all live and play here in Tucson. And it doesn't just obscure our view of the night sky. I mean, it does, yeah, that's the main thing. And as astronomers and people interested in the night sky, that's probably one of the things we're all most concerned about. But there's a lot of other things that light pollution harms in our environment. So first of all, ecology. Hatchling turtles are affected by light pollution. Before artificial illumination, these hatchling turtles would find their way to the sea by orienting themselves towards the brightest spot of light in their field of view, which was typically a full moon reflected into the ocean. But nowadays, that's not the brightest thing anymore. Usually if you're on the beach, there's beachside development, there's condos, there's street lights, and those are the opposite direction of safety for these turtles. So they'll turn around and run towards that light away from the safety of the ocean. And it's pretty tragic. Already only 1 in 1,000 leatherback hatchlings make it to adulthood. So they really need all the help they can get. This is a big one. Birds are actually like moths in that they're attracted to light. This is called positive phototaxis. And not only that, they actually migrate using celestial navigational cues. So when they encounter cities and big bright city lights, they're totally confused by A, not being able to see most of what they're used to seeing in the night sky, and B, then they're attracted to the bright lights of those buildings. So birds will fly towards that light, and if they don't immediately collide with the building, they will then be kind of stuck around that light and just fly around it until they fall to the ground from exhaustion. And there's data that estimates up to 1 billion birds per year die from collisions with buildings. So this is a huge, huge issue, and something that can be fixed with just better lighting practices. So this is a really interesting one. Even trees are affected by light pollution. Trees exposed to artificial light at night bud earlier and lose their leaves later, and also have shorter lifespans in general. And you can see how the distribution of light on these trees has affected their natural cycles. Like, I find these photos to be really poignant. You can see here how that cone of light coming down from the light fixture has caused the tree to keep its leaves only in that area that have been exposed to light. As well as not changing color on that image below, not changing leaves, not losing that chlorophyll because it still thinks the day length is longer. So really, really interesting stuff. Light is pretty powerful, and something that we need to think about affecting just more than ourselves and our view of the night sky. This one's kind of obvious. We just spend a lot of money and a lot of energy lighting up things that we don't necessarily need to light up. 35% of lighting worldwide is wasted light, shooting straight up into the sky. And when we do the math, we spend about $3 to $7 billion per year on this wasted light, while we're also adding 21 million tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So if you're concerned about climate change, if you're concerned about the environment, addressing light pollution is actually a way to address that as well. And it does affect our own health. We are not untouched by this phenomenon. Humanity evolved on this planet with reliable cycles of light and dark, and the addition of light into what has always been darkness disrupts our natural circadian rhythm. The internal cycle, which is our cycle syncing our biological clock with the day and night cycle. And this is mediated by our hormone melatonin. So melatonin is suppressed when we are exposed to artificial light at night, and specifically blue or white light that mimics the experience to what we feel under daytime light, under sunlight. This disrupts our health, exemplified by the fact that exposure to artificial light at night has been linked with increased risk for all types of cancer. And the American Medical Association has actually issued recommendations to shield streetlights and use light that is no greater than 3,000 Kelvin in order to kind of mitigate some of these human health risks. And then heritage of dark skies. Humanity has always looked up to the night sky, right? We've always written stories about the gods in the night skies. We've used them to migrate across land and waterscapes. We've used them to tell time. We've used them to know when to host ceremonies, to know when to plant our crops. And astronomy was our first science because of people being able to look up and be inspired by the night sky. And so to me, it's really a tragedy to think that people around the world are losing that inspiration. They're losing that connection to the greater universe and to kind of an infinite mystery, just because we're really scared of the dark as people. But I think it's important to recognize what this darkness brings, and that dark skies are actually filled with light. You know, when you're out under a sky that doesn't have light pollution, I'm always amazed by the amount of stars and light that I can see in the night sky. So I think our heritage of dark skies and inspiration is a really important piece to consider when talking about protecting dark skies. Okay, so say I've convinced you, you're like, cool, dark skies are good, totally get that. But what about safety, right? Like, we care about safety. We want people to feel safe at night. You know, we want people to, right? You feel safer when you have a light at night, right? There's nothing bad about feeling safer with light. But I would challenge you to say that that's not actually true. The feeling of safety with light does not actually mean you are more safe. And that really is because of glare and lighting design, and how bright light can actually cause very dark places behind it. And that glare coming into your eye can actually restrict your night vision, so you're less capable of seeing things in those dark shadows. So here's a great example. Take a second here and see if you can find the potential stalker in this image. So there he is, right there in the gateway, and he's been there the whole time. But we weren't able to see him because of that glare coming into our eye and into the camera. But once that was shielded and we blocked that direct light coming into our eye, we could see that there's really been a person there the whole time. So it is a myth that more lighting is safer, and the reality is well-designed, smart lighting is actually safer. And I like to talk about motion sensors here, specifically that if you have a light that's triggered on when there's motion outside of your house, that's a really good way to be alerted when there is potentially someone or something out there, as opposed to just having a constant source of light that actually can kind of help people know you're there and kind of help people know about the access and entryway points to your house as well. So just something to consider. And motion sensors, if you've had bad experiences with them, that they pop on way too often, just if a leaf blows by, the sensitivity of your motion sensor can actually be adjusted to be less sensitive. So try that out if you've had any bad experiences with motion sensors. And luckily, light pollution has a very simple solution, and that's better lighting design. And this design has 4 elements, which is shielding, color, intensity, and warranting. So shielding is really simple. Aim our lights down instead of out into your neighbor's window or up into the night sky. Here we can see some before and after images of some unshielded lights, and then post shielding. The illumination level on the ground is the same, but that glare is incredibly reduced. And you can see that the visibility around there is probably a lot better as well. Color. So color of light, we kind of talked about this in the human health piece, but color of light is really important. We want light that is no greater than 3000 Kelvin. So anywhere on the warmer side is going to be better. 2200 is ideal, 2700 is great, 3000 is okay. And we want no greater than that, because that reduces the amount of blue light in the environment, and that type of light doesn't necessarily tell our body that it's daytime and that it's time to wake up, and hurts our circadian rhythm, as well as it mimics the natural sources of light that we as humans have had since evolution, like fire, as well as sunset light is all a lot warmer. And it's lower wavelength, so it's less intense. And it's also going to be better for the environment and the ecology around you as well. And then intensity and warranting are often overlooked aspects of lighting, because even if we shield every single light, there will still be some light that is reflected up from the ground. And to minimize this, we want to use only the amount of light needed for the task at hand, and make sure that really you actually need that light in the first place. And that's what warranting is. If a light is there just to look pretty, maybe take it out and see how pretty a natural night sky can look. And a way to kind of encode this type of lighting into your city or your town is to enact a lighting ordinance. So this is a policy that helps to regulate what type of lighting cities, businesses, and residents can have in their communities. And Tucson actually has a really, really great lighting ordinance. You may notice that our lights are pretty warm. They're fully shielded, and they're actually dimmed after 11 o'clock, they're dimmed as well. So that reduces the amount of light pollution coming up from the sky. And if you're looking about where to find this lighting, check out IDA's Fixture Seal of Approval program. There's an online searchable database where you can find dark sky friendly lighting of all types. And also you can look for this seal on lighting fixtures at your local hardware store. So the International Dark Sky Association, we are kind of the leading organization working globally to protect the night. And if you're interested in supporting us, you can become an IDA member. Just check out darksky.org. We have a local Tucson chapter as well, so you can get involved locally if you're interested. Okay, now to photography, the piece that everyone here is probably interested in. Photography is used to monitor dark skies as well. So this is data from the National Park Service. They use CCD cameras to take all sky images of the night sky and then identify the sources of artificial light at night. So on that top image, you can see it's an all sky image with every source of light, including the Milky Way, including the bright planets, sky, air glow. But then there's also a formula that they use to subtract all of that natural light, like starlight, and then you're left with just the artificial light in the environment. So that's a really interesting way photography is used to monitor and track dark skies in the national parks as well as other places. Photography is generally used to document sky glow as well. I took this image up from Dead Horse Point State Park outside of Moab, Utah. And I've shown it to a lot of people and they're like, wow, look at that sunrise. That's a beautiful sunrise. And that's not the sunrise. Actually, that's sky glow from the small town of Moab, Utah. And you can just see how bright even small town light pollution can be in the environment. Photography can be used to document lighting changes. So here we can see some before and after photos, really illustrating how better lighting practices can make for a better lit environment. So this top image, there's light shining into your eye, into the tree, into the night sky. And then once those are shielded, the trees are a lot less lit up and the ground is so much more uniformly lit. So photography is a great way to show how lighting, how to document lighting changes and to show people that we're not trying to just make it dark, we're just trying to light in a better, more intelligent way. And this same woman took those before and after images, has also used photography to help build support for dark skies in her town of Rappahannock, Virginia. She won a grant and took different images of the Milky Way behind different homes in her community, and then was able to give prints of these beautiful images to these homeowners. And you can imagine, if you're given this picture of your home with a beautiful Milky Way behind it, like, you're probably going to want to protect those night skies and keep them dark. So I thought that was a really great project of using photography as a way to inspire and protect dark skies in local areas. Okay, so how do you do it? How do you take pictures of the night sky? It's pretty simple. When you are taking a picture of the Milky Way, I mean, this is an astronomy audience, so I probably don't really need to talk about this, but we're here. And in the summer, we're looking towards the center of our galaxy, which is that bright center bulge of stars. In the winter, we're looking out away from the night sky, out away from that center and into the more faint arms of the Milky Way. And you really don't need too much specialized equipment. A DSLR or mirrorless camera is great. Sturdy tripod is key. Wide angle lens, so 50 millimeters or wider, which is actually a smaller number. And then a fast lens, so f2.8 is ideal. But if you have a 3.5, no worries, you'll still be able to capture some beautiful night sky images with it. You just might eventually want to invest in a wider lens when you kind of get more into it. And optionally, you're going to want an intervalometer if you're going to want to do time lapses. And here's the general formula that I shoot. Typically, you're going to want to be anywhere from 1600 to 6400 ISO at 10 to 30 seconds with your aperture as wide as possible. 2.8 or less is ideal, but again, 3.5 is okay. And your white balance, typically around 4250 to 4600. And for moonlight, I typically shoot around 5000 Kelvin. And be sure when you're shooting that you shoot in the image type of RAW, because that's going to give you the most amount of data to work with when post-processing. So to focus, this is probably the hardest part of astrophotography. And once you get this down and practice kind of your settings and formula, like, really, it's not that hard. The hardest part is finding dark skies to shoot. So to focus, make sure your lens is on manual focus. You're not going to be able to autofocus on stars. Preset your lens to infinity focus roughly. Enable live view on your camera, which means that the image is showing up on the back of that screen. And center a bright and distant object. So typically in the night sky, that's going to be a planet. Jupiter is a great one nowadays. So find Jupiter in your live view, center that, and then zoom in using the camera zoom, not your lens at all. You're not trying to zoom your lens. You're zooming in just with a little magnifying glass button on the back of your lens that just zooms in your view till you have that as zoomed in as you possibly can get it on Jupiter. Then you're just going to adjust your focus manually until that point of light becomes as small as possible. And a good way to know that you're approaching infinity focus is that if you see other dim stars appearing as you are adjusting your focus. So yeah, this is the hardest part, and it's going to take some practice, but once you get this down, you'll be able to shoot stars anytime you want. So finding the Milky Way, again, this is probably an astronomy audience here, so I may be, this may not be necessary to address, but finding the Milky Way is difficult for some people, especially if they've never had dark skies in their life. So it will typically, the core will always be in the south. Earlier in the season, it will be more southeast, and the Milky Way will be a low spanning arch, kind of reaching around 35 degrees into the sky. And this will be visible at like 3 in the morning, really, really early in the morning. Later in the summer, the Milky Way is going to be south and a little bit more southwest, the core at least. And it's going to typically kind of shoot straight up into the night sky and be more of like a vertical line. And that's going to be visible kind of just as soon as it gets dark as well. So here we can see kind of the differences in the summer and the winter Milky Way. Summer, you get that bright, beautiful core, which all of us astrophotographers tend to chase. And winter, you get that fainter, more delicate Milky Way look And I tend to gravitate more towards like the larger constellations like Orion when thinking about composing an image in the winter. And something else to think about is the different time of night to shoot. So blue hour is one of my favorite times to shoot. It is when the sun is 12 to 18 degrees below the horizon. And that's like kind of right after sunset, but I just typically start shooting blue hour as soon as you can see all of the stars in Scorpius. And that is when there's enough light from the sun as it's setting to keep that sky blue, but it's set far enough that it's dark enough that you can see the Milky Way. And I just think it's magical. But then true dark, here below you can see that's when the Milky Way really pops. And you can see all the beautiful colors in the Milky Way, as well as the incredible colors of air glow in the night sky, and the different kind of colors of the nebula. So yeah, just fun things to play with when shooting. Here's one of my favorite recent images I've taken during blue hour. This is around Moab, Utah. And what I love about shooting blue hour is not only is there enough light to make the sky blue, there's enough light to keep your foreground illuminated. So during a new moon, this would be really hard to shoot, right? If the sun had already set and there's no light from the moon and it's totally dark, this canyon would be pretty dark. And you might have to do 2 separate exposures to get enough starlight to illuminate your foreground, and then another exposure that's less time for your night sky. But during blue hour, it's a perfect way to get a single shot exposure of both your foreground and the night sky. Another thing to think about is the moon. When I first started shooting, I pretty much only shot during the new moon because that's what I was like thought would be the best time to see the night sky. But I have now really turned to start loving moonlight, and I shoot a lot more of moonlit landscapes with the Milky Way as well. But here you can see just kind of how the moonlight illuminates scenes differently. During a full moon, it pretty much looks like daytime, but with stars. And then during the new moon, you get those beautiful silhouettes with the bright night sky. And here's another image again from that same location of my blue hour shot. But this is when the moon is rising, and the moon is actually at about 73% illumination here. And you can still see an incredible amount of the Milky Way. And you get those beautiful, beautiful shadows and light on your foreground. So I would say don't avoid the moon. Use the moon, use it to light up your foreground instead of, shining bright artificial light out there. Use natural moonlight. You'll be happy with your results. Here's another one of my favorite images that I've taken. This was about 83% moon illumination here in Moab as well. This was during a time lapse that I had set up overnight in this field of flowers and beautiful mountain foreground. And this deer just kind of walked by and walked into my time lapse, and I think must have heard a clicking sound. And so I think maybe deer in headlights, stared at it for a minute, scared. But that 20 seconds was really great, and I was able to capture him. And this is just a single exposure. And it wouldn't have been possible without that moonlight to illuminate that foreground. Here is the time lapse of that. And we can see the Milky Way moving across the sky, clouds coming in front of the moon, causing shadows. And then as the moon starts to set, we can really see how the light changes in the landscape. It gets really, really dark. And we're only left with starlight until the sun begins to rise again. Here's another one of my favorite kind of moonrise time lapses, and it shows just how well the moon can illuminate the foreground in vast desert landscapes. So this is Dead Horse Point State Park. And we can see, here the moon, before the moon's rising, that landscape is very dark below. And then as that moon rises, it begins to illuminate the beautiful canyons in the foreground and make the night sky really blue as well. So definitely fun to play with. I would say don't avoid the moon, use it. And the moon's also great for star trails. So if it's too bright to see the Milky Way, you can get some beautiful star trails and foreground illumination using the moon. Here is a time lapse down in Marble Canyon of the North Star staying in place, and Earth's rotation really being illustrated here with those lines of stars. And that's pretty easy to capture. I use a program called Star Stacks, and it's free, so that's cool. And so you're just going to want to use an intervalometer or a built-in intervalometer if you have one on your camera to take images one after another. And it's pretty much the same settings that you use for Milky Way that we talked about earlier. Maybe a little bit lower ISO if you have a lot of moonlight, or shorter exposure time, but you're just going to take as many as possible one after another, and then use star stacks to stack those images, and it creates those star trails for you. You can also just set a lower ISO and a lower aperture and do a really long exposure, but I tend to like to take multiple exposures and stack them because it reduces the noise, as well as you can stack a fun time lapse like this and watch the star trails grow, which I think is pretty cool. Then this is that set of images unstacked. So you can just see how the night sky, the stars are rotating in the sky, the clouds are coming over. Then we take this series of images and stack them to create those star trails. And another fun thing to experiment with is panoramas. So this is, you will set up like a normal exposure. Make sure you level your tripod. Turn your camera from portrait, landscape to portrait. And then take a series of images with a 15 degree overlap, if that makes sense. Or just at least 50%. You want at least 50% of one image to be in the next image for your panorama to adequately stitch. And a lot of tripods have little markings that as you turn, and I tend to go 15 degrees at a time, using those little markings on my tripod to know what my overlap should be. And I love panoramas because they really show you the depth of your scene and can bring about just a better field of view for the expansive night sky. So like here at Dead Horse Point, you can see this image wouldn't have been possible using just one single image. This is a really, the night sky is huge, so you want to be able to capture as much of it as possible, and a lot of times panoramas are the only way to do that. I also think it's really fun to add human subjects into images as well, that really kind of add a sense of scale and personality and depth to the night sky as well, just kind of showing you how dwarfed we are as people by this incredibly vast and large galaxy that we're capturing. And another really fun thing to capture is air glow. This is that emission of light caused by charged particles in our atmosphere that you can't see with your eye. You can only see it with a camera, but here in this time lapse, we can watch it ripple across the sky. It's that green and red. And there's that sunrise making it blue. That's something fun to think about. So if you see a lot of green or red in your night sky, you're not doing something wrong. You're capturing some really cool atmospheric phenomena. Something else fun to try to capture is meteors. We just had a great meteor shower. The Perseids, which is known for its fireballs, and here we can see one of the fireballs captured right through the core of the Milky Way. And this one I just took in Moab. This Perseids, I was really excited to get this beautiful meteor in my 14mm, which is pretty wide. So this was a pretty big meteor to be that large in a 14mm frame. And then this is something crazy that I captured in the Geminids last year, which is a wiggly meteor. I had never seen one of these before, and these are pretty rare. But they do happen, and if you have any pictures of wiggly meteors, please share them. I know Babak Freshi is actually collecting images of wiggly meteors as well, so feel free to send them to him and the world at night. And then finally, I just want to take a moment to invite everyone to our first ever Women in Astrophotography Happy Hour. That's going to be October 1st. So if you're a woman and you're interested in astrophotography, or you are an astrophotographer, please join us. This is just kind of the first attempt to get everyone together and chat about how we can support bringing more women into this field. We have an Instagram, it's at Women in Astro, so give us a follow, and the link to register is in the bio there. So thank you so much for listening and tuning in today. Here's all my contact information. I would love to hear from you. You can find me on Instagram. I have a website, and you can shoot me an email to my personal Gmail as well. If you have any questions or any follow-up, I believe we're going to do a question and answer session after this. So I look forward to chatting with you all. And again, I just want to say thank you for your interest in protecting dark skies. Thank you for your interest in capturing images of the night sky. For me, it's been the best way to communicate the night sky and its meaning to people, and hopefully help raise awareness and bring protection to this incredible resource that we have, especially here around Tucson and around the world. So with that, thank you again, University of Arizona, Lunar Planetary Lab, and Allison for the invite. And I look forward to chatting with you all after this, and happy shooting.
Okay. Excellent. Oh, so much good content in there. And I know that you just gave us like so much instruction too. So just as a side note, we will be posting these videos to our YouTube because I know I need to hit play, rewind, and listen to your instructions for the landscape shooting techniques. So yes, thank you so much. Let's go into the Q&A. We got some questions here. This was something that I was wondering about too, so I'm glad the attendee asked about the image of the tree leaves is very interesting. Do you know of example papers that cover this science with representative imagery?
Well, that is a great question, and I'm glad that image spoke to you as well, because I think they're really crazy to see. But I don't know off the top of my head of any example papers, but I would suggest that anyone who's looking for information on research specifically about artificial light at night, check out IDA's Artificial Light at Night Research Database. And that can just be accessed by going to allendb.darksky.org. And we have collected over many years every paper we've ever found that has anything to do with artificial light at night. And so you can search that database by keyword or topic. And so if you're looking for ecology or trees, or specifically, you can use those keywords to find any article that you may be looking for. I can also find the exact website where I got those images from. It's from the physics department of a university in Florida. I can't remember exactly which one, but Allison, I can share that link with you.
Yeah.
And then we can post that somewhere.
Yes, we could post that. And then I was just about to drop into the chat. Was that Allen .db? Did I catch that right?
It's just allendb.darksky.org.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
.darksky, all one word, .org. Okay, I'm just typing that out in the chat there. Allen with A-L-A-N?
Yeah.
Got it. Cool. That's a really good resource. Yes, and so that made me kind of, how long have I been blindly walking around trees and different downtown centers where you see the mismatched leaves, and you just think, oh, the tree's doing its tree thing, but it's next to a lamppost is the thing to kind of look at and see which, it's all about that angle lighting, like you were saying. It's if it's pointed right at it, of course there's a response, because a lot of lights, I guess as we move into the LED world, maybe those are less in the frequencies that the chlorophyll wants to respond to, but a lot of the light bulbs and lamps that we have been using is in that spectrum of light that trees already know. So Makes
Yeah,
sense they pick it
and
up.
there's also some really interesting, I've seen some really interesting images of rice paddies actually in Asia, where the street lights that are next to the rice paddies like have a completely different growing pattern than the ones further out that aren't touched by any light. So definitely a really interesting subject that is evolving. Like I think people are just finding out more and more every day, and it's kind of a new and evolving field of research, which is kind of exciting.
Yes, and then of course the astrobiologist in me starts to say, wow, different stars, different plants, different planets, right? Growth patterns. I mean, we know leaves here on Earth, and maybe the leaf structure that we see here on Earth is also a response of the light from the sun or something too. So yes, interesting just to wonder beyond for the exoplanet world. Another question, and again, for the attendees, we'll be posting the video since you had such a great layout and descriptive ways. They're asking, was it 15 or 50% overlap on panoramas? I think you said, I thought I heard 50, but this is a good
Yeah,
clarification.
I'm sorry, I wasn't really very clear on that. So when I first started shooting, I would shoot 50% overlap of images. So like at least, seeing what I'm shooting and having at least half of that in my next panorama frame. But as I've learned more kind of just like about the actual more professional ways of doing photography, you want to measure 15 degrees of rotational change. And I don't know exactly what that relates to in terms of overlap on your photo. And you're actually going to probably want to do maybe even a little bit less of a degree change if you have a more zoomed in lens, because it kind of depends on how wide your field of view is. But 15-degree change is going to be a safe bet for any kind of wide-ish angle panorama.
Okay, yes, these rule of thumbs. I know that when we had Adam Block on Friday, we had that kind of conversation too. It's like, wow, how do you you got a bright star and a faint nebula, what are these kind of rules of thumb? So that's really nice to at least this baseline, and really excited to also hear about the workshop. So we'll post that as well. I know that's this week. Is it October already? It's almost October 2020. So I think that Women in Astrophotography workshop would be really neat. And a few of our attendees, when I had mentioned the potential for us, and I know that Alan Strauss over at Stewart Observatory in Mount Lemmon and Creative Center for Photography have want to get you guys on board to do these astrophotography workshops. So there is interest out there. So we'll make sure we tell our attendees about the women one as well. Question about the light trespassing. This is a whole loaded kind of idea. I always thought that maybe I was light sensitive and like it drives me crazy, and I want red light on if I'm doing night sky stuff, and why are you blaring your lights? Why the world is LED? And I had never thought about it in the past that you're actually being violated. Can you talk about I'm just curious as the I don't want to say the practical side, but do you know of anything? Has this ended up in court? Has there been actual like you trespass my light? Has anyone actually brought this into the court of law?
That's a good question. I don't really know off the top of my head. I can't think of any specific lawsuits about that, because usually it does get just settled at a domestic level, right? It's just kind of talking to your neighbor, and that's like something that I think is really cool about this. It's definitely a bipartisan issue. Light pollution is, everyone loves dark skies, and so people, they can say, oh, I don't want you to tell me what to do with my light on my land. I can do what I want. And I totally respect that, right? Like we each have a right to do what we want to do on our property. But I would hope that my neighbor also respects my right to want my property not lit up by their light, So it's a really interesting concept and something I think of thinking about in a way that, can speak to all parties and all people on side of the spectrum, right? Like it's not about telling somebody what to do on their property. It's just about respecting individual property rights.
Yes, I will follow up with that because this really struck me, a fellow telescope operator from several years ago. And the astronomer and him, it drove him so crazy that his neighbor would always leave this particular light on. Tucson has these light ordinances, which was the follow-up question for this. But he would then himself trespass onto the yard, and he'd go over there every night and just, undo her. He would just slightly unscrew it, and the neighbor caught him one day. And of course he ran off the property, but then he was trespassing then to like deal with this light trespassing problem. So that just made me wonder. I'm like, I wonder if this is actually ended up in court, because especially a situation like that where someone then feels like, no, you're violating me, and then they both think that they have this right, which then leads us into Tucson. So yeah, if you're in Tucson, if you've been around Tucson, if you've flown over Tucson in an airplane, you'll notice it has that strange orange glow, and that's the sodium-based lights. Do you know how that came about for Tucson? I don't think every city in America obviously has a light ordinance. As we know, the disco ball of Phoenix actually affects the telescopes here more than the Tucson light. So when we turn on our telescopes at Kitt Peak or Mount Lemmon, we actually are more invaded by Phoenix than we are in Tucson. So how did Tucson become a safe space for dark skies in some regard?
Yeah, well, Tucson has been an interesting community that has always seemed to really value the astronomical community. That brings a lot of economic value to the community. And so I wasn't actually around for the lighting ordinance of Tucson kind of coming into play. Luckily, it's been around for a long time, just kind of with the historic appreciation of the astronomy observatories nearby. But we actually do no longer use sodium-based lights in Tucson. The low-pressure sodium lights actually are not manufactured anywhere in the world anymore, which is really sad. But also there's some drawbacks to those sodium lights, which is color rendering. Specifically, it's really hard to see if something is blood or water on the ground, and I've heard that from police before. So Tucson's new lights actually use our LEDs, but they're 3000 Kelvin LEDs. And John Barentine, my colleague, did a study about the lighting conversion here in Tucson and found that with our conversion, as well as the dimming practices, overall light output into the night sky was reduced in Tucson. So that's something good that Dave, I hear you. High Kelvin LEDs are evil, but not all LEDs are evil, right? LED lighting can be done well. It can be done right, specifically as well in Flagstaff. They're using PC Amber LED. They were the real kind of pioneers of sodium lighting. Like, I think, Chris Lugenbuehl and Lance Diskin probably have like stockpiles of sodium lights that they just hang out with because they love them so much. But they too have made the transition to LED because that's just the way that the industry is going. And an LED conversion doesn't have to mean death to dark skies. It can be an opportunity for energy savings and for just a new way to do dark sky friendly lighting. As long as those energy savings aren't then spent on putting in more lights, LEDs can be done well, but you do have to be mindful again of that rebound effect of kind of the sustainability piece of those lights as well.
Yes, yeah, you made a good point about kind of the sustainability and tying it into climate change. I mean, there's interplay between all of these. And then when you had brought that point up, a lot of lights you see at night just pointing up. So what are the thoughts towards, I know Tucson, they all have to point down, but are there other cities that at least point down if they're not using these better, LEDs? Or, I mean, some cities, it's just a free-for-all. They're just shining up into the night sky, wasting energy, light pollution.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, people a lot of times, like those historic globe lights, people think they're pretty. I've heard lighting referred to as the jewelry of the home. People use light to create beauty, which, is fine. I love beauty, but it can be done in a more responsible way. And that's how it really comes down to warranting and intensity too. So if you have a globe light that's historic, that's actually, gas lamps from back in the day, they aren't fully shielded, but they're such a low intensity and warm color that they're doing less damage than a really bright, high Kelvin, yet fully shielded LED. And so Phoenix is actually a really interesting example of this. You mentioned that Phoenix is more detrimental to observing than Tucson is, but Phoenix actually has 2,700 Kelvin LED lights in there throughout their entire city. But the difference is Phoenix lights every residential neighborhood street, whereas Tucson doesn't. So that kind of comes back to that warranting piece where Phoenix just has as many lights as possible in every place possible. And Tucson really thinks about where are these lights needed and where can we leave places without lights.
Yes, and then also that kind of ties into the humanistic side of like we feel it's safe, but you know, we haven't had electricity that long in the grand scheme of like human civilization. So I kind of wonder if there's research or if you've seen along the line where this illusion that we're safer with electrical lights turned on happened. I wonder if it happened like pretty soon after we had lamps outside and we could turn on a porch light. Because before we just had candle light, and you know, you wouldn't keep the candle on all night outside just to feel safe, I think. So something about the electronic availability of turning on a light, I wonder where that came about, because I've often felt is an illusion as well, because I'm blinded in different ways. I'm like, I feel like I can't see anything that's actually coming at me. So I wonder, have you seen any research of like the historical kind of the human feel for that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about any research specifically on that, but in my mind, I think it does come from even when we were evolving as humans, we were more susceptible to predators at night. You know, it's always been kind of a more like, we're not nocturnal basically, and so right. Because of that, we're more comfortable in a space where we're evolved to exist and do our daily functions, and then evening was a time to be a little bit more worried about being attacked by an animal, you know, but we're not necessarily going to be attacked by animals anymore. People maybe, but it's actually found that most violent crimes are done during the day. So it's really, I think it is an illusion. It's the psychology of the fear of the dark, and people are surprised when I tell them, like, I am scared of the dark too. Like, I'm not immune to that. I think as humans, we're all just scared of that unknown, of that uncertainty of what's out there. But that's where I think really challenging that perception, you know, and not just accepting it, and really trying to appreciate the things that darkness can bring to us and has brought to us over our history as humans is a good thing to do.
Yeah, you're right. There's probably some, you know, we're animals in that regard. There's some leftover internal instinct of like, there's things out there that might get me. Even though I agree, I love the night sky. I mean, but when I'm camping alone and I turn off my flashlight or my headlamp, I mean, I feel that of like, you know, just like bear question mark, you know. So maybe that's just what it is, and then just the fact that we can turn on electrical things now just kind of already coincides with us being afraid of it already. You made an interesting point. I'm sure we've all noticed that blue sky. I always call it cerulean skies at that, but there's blue hour. So I'm really happy to hear of this actual term, and especially from astrophotographers. I've noticed it's blue. And do you know if that's just the effect of yeah, you said it's like 18 degrees, the sun's below, where we're just at that particular angle where blue light can then hit the top of the atmosphere again? Like we've gotten past that red threshold of that low, you know, that low angle where we're just getting that bright particle scattering. Are we going back to Rayleigh scattering, but more diffuse Rayleigh scattering? Is that what's kind of happening? It's still sunlight, obviously, but just a tail edge of it because of the angle?
Exactly. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Exactly. Right. It's just those last rays of sun that are still able to light up that sky. But blue hour is so magical. It's like, it's my favorite time. And I think it's definitely underrated in photography and astrophotography specifically, because you don't get all of the details of the Milky Way core, you know, but I really love getting details of like the foreground and like the beautiful scenery that's underneath the stars. And so, especially if you're new to astrophotography, blue hour is a really good time to practice getting both your foreground and your night sky in one shot, in a single shot, which is my preferred way to do astrophotography. So
Yeah, no, it was so amazing seeing your canyon walls lit up, because I've obviously seen these astrophotography photos throughout the year, and yeah, sometimes you don't get that detail. So I agree, the blue hour might be underrated there. And I've also heard, and I didn't realize the blue hour term was really what the time it was, but I've heard a lot of optical eye research looking at the humans actually have a hard time adjusting at that time of night because it's not fully dark and it's not fully bright, and a lot of car accidents happen, I think, in the blue hour too, or that amount of time, just because it's like you're not fully in your dark adjusted eyes and something floating in between. But the camera, of course, is able to then find the middle ground of like, no, I can see everything almost at that time. So our eyes fail at blue hour, but the camera really does the great work there. And then before we switch to our next presenter, the last thought about the air glow. You had the CCD image earlier in the presentation, and it had the air glow on the top one. How long of an exposure do you have to get to see air glow, or was that a certain detector that was able to see that a bit better?
So yeah, airglow can be captured by any basic DSLR camera. When people are out shooting, you'll definitely catch it if it's out there. I've found it's easier to capture airglow in colder, higher elevation climates. I'm not sure why that is. Maybe just, less, you get to see the atmosphere more clearly, just kind of, I guess, why we have observatories on the top of mountains. So yeah, I would say airglow is super easy to capture if it's out there, and if you're looking to capture airglow, get up into the mountains, into like cooler temperatures.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Good. Yeah. Like I said, you had so much good knowledge in there. You had a mini workshop for us, almost essentially, between that. And then I'll just read out some of the comments before we let you go. Yeah, Lacey mentioned with the vegetation around M dwarf stars could be black. Okay, so black leaves. That's a little scary, spooky. And also, she's mentioned she could see the Milky Way almost every night in Flagstaff, which made me wonder. I had heard a quote saying that nowhere on Earth is safe from light pollution. Do you agree with that fact? As everywhere on Earth, even in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, you'd say, maybe this air glow, right, plays that part. Is there anywhere dark sky safe left on Earth?
That's a great question. I would say everything is threatened, definitely. I mean, even in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, there's huge squid boats that use giant lights to capture squids as they're fishing at night. I mean, that's probably your best place, is in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. But yeah, it's a huge issue, and you can see just from the map I showed earlier how much it's increasing every year.
Wow. Yeah. Well, thanks for illuminating us in the dark here. Yeah, we really appreciate it. And again, we would have loved to see you live here, and we hope that you'll submit some of those time lapses for the art show next year. Those were really cool. So remember that astrophotography is in the realm of art of planetary science submissions. So with that, Bettymaya, thank you so much for coming on, and we hope to see you virtually or in person again.
Yeah, thank you everyone for listening, and don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions.
Yes, yeah, the information's on there again. Her all the screen captures and everything will be on a giant YouTube video, so go back and rewatch to do some of your own astrophotography. Thank you.
Thanks, Allison.
Okay, bye.